Welcome back to another episode of For the Love of Lore. I am Austin, your co-host for today's adventure.
And I'm Abby. We are so glad you're here.
So today in Middle-earth, we are going to learn about the flight of the Noldor, the reckoning of Melkor, and the rise of the Sindar.
And over in Westeros, we're going to the Vale for a meet and greet with House Arryn.
So, grab a flagon of ale and let's go on an adventure.
Go on an adventure.
Woo! Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to your favorite podcast, I assume, For the Love of Lore. So this week we're going to start with a little check-in because, you know, we gotta make sure the mentals are all good for everybody, and I have to address the elephant in the room for you YouTube fans. Yes, this week looks a little different. I unfortunately am a little sickly. Got a little bit of the nasals, got a little bit of the throat, sore throat going on. Hopefully just a little cold, but we'll see. Didn't want to risk getting the sis sick, but it's going to look a little different on YouTube. Should be mainly the same for you podcasters. But that is a quick change. Check in for me. I've been pretty good. I mean, we're kind of gearing up at work for the season. We got a little tease of warm weather, and we thought, oh, we can go do outdoor work, and we can't. It's cold again. So just kind of gearing up at work, getting ready for that. Still doing my nerd things, still going to bowling league. Got a 186 this past week. So okay.
Now, is that good? I don't know.
For a casual bowler, I'm going to call it good. Now, I'm sure some experienced bowlers would be like, that's fine. But, for me, who doesn't bowl a lot, I'm going to call that pretty good. Because, again, a perfect score is 300. I'd say
Oh, okay.
my true average is probably around 130, 140. So for me, I felt pretty good. So that's me. How are you doing, Sis?
We're good. We, one of the unpublished George R. R. Martin books that we are waiting on first, of course, is Winds of Winter. But after that, supposedly, is A Dream of Spring. And I feel like that is me right now. I'm dreaming of spring. We've got some exciting things going on at work. I'm a teacher, but I'm also part of I co-sponsor the yearbook. So we've got some big yearbook events coming up. One of them's tomorrow. One of them is in March. So yeah, that'll be fun. But I am going on a spring break trip with my daughter, just her and I. So that'll be fun. That's what I'm looking forward to that the most.
That's going to be awesome. So I'm glad we are both doing well, because I must tell you, Middle-earth, sis, is not doing well.
Are we on the struggle bus in Middle-earth?
We may be on the struggle bus.
Okay.
We are now at chapter 9. It is called The Flight of the Noldor. And it's not great. So I got a little blurb here to kind of set the mood here for the next chapter of the Silmarillion. One of the longer ones. It was about 20 pages, which is a lot for the Silmarillion. Those chapters are usually around 4 to 10 pages. So 20, that's a lot for Tolkien in this book.
You know, a lot to say.
A lot to say. So here I'm going to try to be dramatic as possible.
Okay.
In the land of the undying, where the light of the two trees still shone, the greatest of the elves stood at a precipice, a choice between fate and free will, between loyalty and vengeance. A fiery prince bound by an unbreakable oath. I said both. A people caught between the will of the gods and the whisper of rebellion. What could possibly go wrong? A lot. A whole lot. Welcome to the flight of the Noldor, where bad decisions and worse consequences reign supreme. Boom.
Dang. Now, did you write that or did Tolkien?
ChatGPT wrote that one for me. I was trying so hard last night to get a creative bone going for that. And I was like, you know what? It's modern day. Let's use a little bit of AI in this podcast.
There we go.
I thought they did pretty good. And that was it sets the tone pretty well for what's going to happen. And there was a couple of renditions because they tried to get a little spoilery with it. So I had to tell ChatGPT to pull it back because they can't spoil it. This is my time.
But I like your narrator voice.
I know. I'm waiting for some voiceover calls. Marvel, hit me up. Star Wars, hit me up. I'm ready. Okay. Chapter 9. Buckle up, because Chapter 9 of the Silmarillion is one of the wildest rides in Tolkien's lore. This is kind of where everything changes, and it is the moment where the Noldor kind of go from the golden child of Eru to the most dysfunctional family reunion you'll ever see. So, yeah.
Fun and dysfunctional?
Yeah. Ye shall see. So, I have kind of, I told Abby this before the podcast. I'm changing up the vibe of how I tell this a little bit, because the way Tolkien wrote these chapters is, shocker, very wordy, a lot of names, a lot of details that I didn't feel were integral to the story. So I have kind of, what I'm calling this is my millennial breakdown of the Silmarillion. It's we're taking away the big words, we're taking away unnecessary names, we're getting this a little more casual. So Act 1 is called the Spark of Rebellion. So, for a quick recap for what happened last week, Morgoth has been a little naughty lately. His behavior has not been good. So he's been spreading his lies, he's been stoking his paranoia, and just when things are at their messiest, this dude goes and murders Finwë, the High King of Noldor, and he steals Feanor's Silmarils. So if we remember they burned down the trees, and then now everything's dark and everybody's confused, like what is going on? In that chaos, Morgoth went to the north to Feanor's castle, knocked on the gate. Finwë kind of didn't know who was there. He thought it was Feanor returning. And right there, Morgoth kind of slashes his throat and goes down into the dungeons, steals all the jewels and the Silmarils.
Now, sorry, I know I was here for the last episode. I remember sitting here, but please remind me who Morgoth is.
So Morgoth is Melkor, and it's funny you ask, because when Feanor learns of that, this is a great transition, sis. When Feanor learns of this betrayal, this is when he names Melkor Morgoth officially. Morgoth has a specific name and meaning, which I will get into in a second. But yeah, Feanor, our boy's a little dramatic. He's a little hot-headed. And as his mom described him, he has the fire of 1,000 suns within him. So, as you can guess, he's not very calm right now. So Feanor, still riding that high of being exiled for threatening his own brother by the sword tip. Bold move. Now is even more angry, and Melkor, he's about to get it. Well, so Feanor thinks. So in his infinite sassy wisdom, Feanor has named Melkor Morgoth, which means the black foe of the world.
Okay.
So yeah, now Morgoth has kind of transitioned from that naughty, annoying pest to this guy's no good. So before anything, now he has named Melkor the kind of the great evil of the world, and we now get the Oath of Feanor. So Feanor's dad's dead, Silmarils are gone, dude's in a bit of a panic. So he gathers his 7 sons, and in an over-the-top fashion, they swear the most aggressive, no way out, doomed to backfire oath in history. And the key points are this: the Silmarils belong to them, no matter what. And if anyone else, man, elf, Valar, or stray house cat, tries to claim them, they will be destroyed. And no takes backsies. Ever.
The house cats, correct? No house cat. No justice for the cats.
No justice for the cats. It doesn't matter. If they steal those Silmarils, it's over.
Also, he has 7 sons, so that's a good number according to Martin.
It is. This is where they link up. So right now, he's an angry little fella, and so the reaction from the Noldor is kind of like, this kind of seems like a bit much, and this dude's a little full of himself. But Feanor doesn't really care. You know, his speech is electric, the mood is intense, and somehow he convinces a ton of the Noldor to go with him, even though they're kind of a little wishy-washy. They are upset about the trees being destroyed, so that's why they're kind of pushed to go with him. The Noldor feel as if some action is warranted, and I have to give credit to Melkor / Morgoth here. He is the one who has kind of sown these doubts, and even though he won't admit it, these doubts have been sown into Fëanor about the Valar want to take these Silmarils for themselves, and now Fëanor's kind of thinking, oh, maybe the Valar actually took it in the darkness. So we've got some interesting things at play here. And if you were wondering what our gracious angels, the Valar, think of all this, they're not happy. I think you could easily assume that. And they can kind of tell that there's some bad things coming. So now we enter what I call Act 2 of this chapter, and it's called the Doom of Mandos. And I am calling it the ultimate, I told you so. So, before they can leave, the Valar send Mandos, the Doomsman, one of the angels, and his whole kind of thing is that he's kind of the tough guy on campus. He's the rule maker. He's like, you're going to follow what I say, and you're going to like it. So he goes up and kind of delivers one of the coldest, most terrifying prophecies in the history of prophecies. So kind of picture like a ghostly figure kind of stepping forward, voice like a distant thunder. And I have paraphrased his quote to millennial talk. He goes something like this. You guys are about to make a huge mistake. You will bring nothing but death, despair, and regret. Your journey will be full of betrayal, and your Silmarils will bring more suffering than joy. And if you leave, you cannot return. So this actual quote was probably more than a page and a half in the book, so that is why I millennialized it. But that is the gist. Mandos ain't happy.
Right.
So what does Fëanor and the Noldor elves do? They basically say, cool story, bro. We're still going. And at this point, even the more level-headed Noldor, like Fingolfin, which is Fëanor's brother, are hesitant, but now they've gone too far to go back, essentially, with seeing how mad Mandos and the rest of the Valar are. So we now enter Act 3, and we have a term that we have used in your segments quite a bit coming up here.
Mm-hmm. I see it.
It is the kinslaying at Alqualande.
Oh, it's a bad sin. Can't be slaying no kin.
Can't be doing that. The old gods said no, 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 and I think these gods also say no, no, no to that. So what I would call this act is things get messy. So the Noldor now full of anger and confusion and a little bit of I'm better than you Valar-ishness march south, and they're kind of, again, remember I described this Aman as this crescent-shaped land. They are heading now towards the middle where the Lonely Island is. We're heading back to the Lonely Island because apparently that's just where everything happened. Yes, we're on a boat. So they are kind of ready to set sail for Middle-earth. The Noldor at this point said, we don't want to be here anymore. You guys are not gracious hosts. You guys maybe stole our jewels. But there's one problem. The Noldor have no way to get to Middle-earth because if you remember, they got to Aman because an island floated over there for them. The Lonely Island floated for them. So
the ocean god did that.
Yes.
Right?
Look at you. Look at you. So how do they get there? Well, they go talk to their elf brethren, the Talari, who I described a couple episodes as the boat makers, kind of the more whimsical, nature-focused elves of the group. And they are at Alqualande, which is the Lonely Island, and Fëanor kind of being the master negotiator that he is, all sarcasm intended there, he asks nicely for their ships. And the Talari, being rational and still followers of the Valar, kind of say, no, you can't have them. So the Talari kind of have no reason to support this. Again, they've kind of been doing their own thing. They're, in my head, they're just they're campers in the woods having a great time, having campfires, singing songs. And then their cranky cousins come. They're trying to get them in this rebellion that the Talari want no part in. So they kind of say, stealing our boats is a major no-no. So what does Fëanor do in his infinite wisdom and calmness? Oh, just kind of casually starts a war against his own people. Yeah. So this moment marks the first time elves kill other elves, kind of the first murder, if you will, of Middle Earth and Aman as a whole, and it's brutal.
Okay.
It is not pretty. I mean, there is the Noldor kind of take out their anger from the Valar and Morgoth on the Telari elves. The Telari elves don't have a lot of weapons. You know, I told you Feanor's kind of been fashioning a ton for his elves. The Telari, I kind of refer to them as the potheads of Aman because I think they're just kind of vibing in the trees. So they really just don't have a way to defend themselves, and they are just completely outmatched, and Feanor and his warriors slaughter them and take their ships. And yeah, Fingolfin and his group of elves, which includes Galadriel, were not present. I want to make that clear. They were kind of lagging behind. Feanor kind of pushed ahead because he is so angry. He is so desperate to go get this action done, and Fingolfin has his reservations. Thank God he has an actual brain, and Galadriel, of course, Bay. They did not take part in this. I want to make that very clear. Some people get that confused. They were not there. They actually arrive after, and they see the bloodbath and are just filled with so much emotion and sadness for their Telari brethren. And at this point, it's kind of that thing where you show up to the crime scene late and you kind of look guilty because you're there. So they're kind of worried that they are now guilty by association, if you will. So they're kind of stuck in this mess, and they're like, okay, well, I guess we're gonna ride with you now, Feanor. We kind of have to. You've put us in this spot. So we now move on to Act 4. And this is what I call the Great Betrayal. Feanor's most villainous move yet. So now the Noldor have their ships, the Telari are dead, and they have set sail for Middle Earth. But there's one last twist, and it's a doozy. Feanor, being Feanor, realizes he doesn't want to waste time ferrying everyone across. So instead of going back for Fingolfin and Galadriel, he says, we're out. And good luck to you guys with the Valar. He burns the rest of the ships that he doesn't use.
Wait, what? Why?
Because he basically can feel that Fingolfin isn't fully committed to the cause, and two, kind of wants to leave a scapegoat for the Valar in terms of who committed this murder. So he leaves the Noldor stranded behind on the lonely island, and while him and his people are sailing to Middle Earth to kind of go reign supreme over there and do what they want, because in Aman, they're under the careful watch of the Valar. In Middle Earth, they're kind of on their own, and that's what Feanor wants at this point.
Okay.
So, Fingolfin now, basically standing in a field of dead bodies and burning ships, says, well, we can't stay here either. I mean, we're gonna be in trouble too. So, he has no choice but to embark on the deadliest trek imaginable. He has to cross and here I'm going to butcher this name, the Helcaraxi. Man, I hope I pronounced that right. It's called the Grinding Ice. So a couple episodes, I talked about how Middle Earth and Aman are both kind of crescent shaped in a way, and they meet at a northern tip. But that northern tip is frozen over because of Morgoth's castle Autumno. His great evil is spreading, and it comes in the form of cold ice. So it makes the cross from Aman to Middle Earth very, very treacherous. It is, it's sub-zero temperatures. There's no food. You can't make a fire because there's no sticks or wood. I mean, it is a long, cold march into Middle Earth. And the best way to describe it is a frozen wasteland of doom. And many of the elves who went with Fingolfin tragically end up dying on this journey because it is just so brutal. But Fingolfin has that steel resolve. Fingolfin and Galadriel, I want to give her some credit here, had that steel resolve of like, we're not giving up. We have a battle to fight. We have a wrong to fix. So they push through, and by the time that they reach Middle Earth, Fingolfin is no longer Feanor's responsible brother anymore. He has now kind of made his own claim or right for being a king. So this is the exact fear that Fëanor had, is that Fingolfin was kind of amassing his own sect of the Noldor. And now with this long, hard journey, the Noldor now kind of look at him as the new king of the Noldor. So as you can imagine, there are some tiffs coming up. But the Noldor's fate in general is sealed. Fëanor's oath has been sworn, the blood of their kin stains their hands, and the road ahead is paved with war and sorrow. But their tale is far from over. So the questions we now have to ask are, what price will they pay for their defiance? And will the Silmarils ever bring them the glory that they truly seek? These are the questions we now kind of have to ask going forward, because Middle-earth, again, yes, it was created by Eru and the Valar, but it is kind of a place of where they're not as involved. So it is now, chaos is now on the table, is what I'll call it.
Yeah. Discord, if you will.
Oh, yes. Just like the application and the favorite word of Tolkien in this book. I would like to take a moment to appreciate, I don't like to appreciate villains too much, but I would like to say this was a masterfully created plan by Morgoth. Like I told you last episode, he was trying to take basically 3 groups of elves and a god and kind of sow discord amongst them. And this chapter, he really just kind of had to sit back, wipe his hands, and be like, great. He didn't have to do anything.
Right.
So he sat back and kind of watched everything self-destruct, and this is what I call a classic Morgoth move. So we now see how evil this guy is, the power of his woven lies in the Elven Kingdom, and he's probably feeling pretty good about himself right now.
Right.
So that was what I consider the craziest chapter in the Silmarillion so far. That was chapter 9.
It's kind of jam-packed.
Yeah.
And makes me wonder what inspired it in the first place, because so much of the Lord of the Rings is kind of based on World War I, but this is set way before that stuff. So I wonder if he even drew on anything from history, or if it was just in his imagination.
I know, I'm trying to think back to, this will be more your alley. I don't know how much there is of kinslaying in the English history.
A lot.
A whole lot. It feels like it is derived from something, because it is, if you read the whole chapter of Tolkien, you can kind of get a taste for the fall of Fëanor here. My millennial talk may have gone too quick, but I didn't want to sit here for 2 hours describing it. But
no, yeah, and I think it made it more relatable.
Yeah, because again, if you sat down and opened this book and read this chapter, you would probably give up 2 pages in, because it's just chock full of names you don't know, places you don't know, and it's just we haven't recorded in about a week and a half, and it's taken me a week and a half to really digest this chapter. You should see my notebook; it's disgusting looking. So I hit a point last night when I was trying to write the script of I was writing it out. I just didn't feel good about it. So I pivoted and I was like, you know what? Let's just write this in a talk that I think is more digestible. So that's what we got. Fëanor, dude, I think could have been a great leader of elves, but just a lot of things went the wrong way, and he is now not a great fella.
Yeah, he's had like a downward character arc.
Yes. And it had been foreshadowed the whole time. If you shout out to previous episodes, if you go back, you'll hear all the foreshadowing of this fall of Fëanor. But his story is far from over. We have a lot more to see and hear and learn about, and it will shape the future of Middle-earth. Short term for bad, I think long term for good. You'll see later. But now we kind of move on to chapter 10, and the focus shifts. In my script, I said the focus shifts a bit. I'm going to say it shifts a lot a bit. So these events of chapter 10 take place while this whole Noldor uprise is happening. So while they were over there kind of busy ruining their own lives, another group of elves has been thriving in Middle-earth, the Sindar. So to recap, the Sindar are the Grey Elves, They are Talari. That is who they are. They're the Talari who heard. I don't know if you remember this. They're the elves who heard the call too late.
Yeah.
They kind of got stuck there, but they also kind of wanted to be stuck there because they loved the forest and the beaches too much. They thought it was too beautiful to leave. So they've kind of renamed. They've rebranded, if you will. So then they now call themselves the Sindar or the Grey Elves. Okay. And they do have a king, and Fëanor and Fingolfin are two names to remember, but if you're gonna remember another one, it's this one. It is Thingol. And if you look at our episode name, it is the title of the episode, because this is a very, very pivotal character. Fëanor is the first main character that's pivotal. Thingol is going to kind of transition and take that mantle as the next headpiece of the story going forward. So chapter 10, I've broken this up into acts, a little shorter, a little more digestible. So act 1 is Thingol, Melian, and Doriath. I called it Middle Earth power couple.
Are they a throuple?
You'll see here in a second. So
okay, all right.
Doriath is a place, I should say, first of all.
Oh, okay. I thought it was 3 people. I was like, that
no.
Is a throuple.
I will clarify. Doriath is a place.
Okay.
So Thingol is not just any elf. He is the one who actually met the Valar, and he kind of lit the tale. His claim to fame is he falls head over heels for this elf named Melian, and she is a Maya, so she is technically a goddess. And when he first lays eyes upon Melian, he literally freezes in place for years while staring at her. Isn't that wild?
It's like fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes. I'm like, Tolkien, there's other ways to say that you love someone other than freezing in place and being kind of creepy.
Yeah, it's only funny because that is also my trauma response is freeze. Like my whole body just stops and I'm like, I don't know what to do.
You're channeling your inner Thingol.
Yes, exactly.
So he freezes in place for years, but good news is it does work out. Melian agrees to be his queen, and together they rule Doriath. It is kind of the heartland of the Sindar, and again, Doriath does transition to be the woods of the Mirkwood.
Okay.
Yeah, at some point, again, where Legolas is from, it's just called Doriath for right now. So right now, she's very powerful. She is a minor goddess, technically being a Maya. She is gifted with divine wisdom, supernatural foresight, and a protective barrier of magic. And it is known as the Girdle of Melian.
Oh, that's a terrible.
It's awful. It is awful. I don't know what Tolkien was doing here. I think he got a little whimsical. After so much stress and pain,
now we got girdles.
Yeah. Okay. So this power, the way I'm going to tie it into Lord of the Rings is it's similar to what the Rings of Power do for Galadriel and Elrond in terms of protecting their realms. It is kind of the same power of it. It doesn't specifically say what, it just says that it protects their lands and kind of keeps them safe. What differs with Melian's is it actually hides the land too, so no one can find it.
Oh.
Yes, and they kind of did this because they know about Morgoth, and they're kind of trying to hide from him and all of his troubles. So while they're kind of out here thriving, living in the woods, having a great time in Middle Earth, Morgoth has now moved back into the north. He's not in a tomb now, and I'll talk about that in a second, but he is in the Iron Mountains in the north. Okay. So it is fairly close to where Melian is. So you got the Iron Mountains in the way north, and if you go a little southeast, you'll have the Lonely Mountain where the story of the Hobbit takes place. And if you go a little southwest of that is where you have Doriath. So they're pretty close. Morgoth and Doriath are pretty close in proximity at this time. So we now kind of get into Act 2, and I call it Morgoth's first attempt. Dun dun dun. The orcs are here. So Morgoth now, he has a bit of a problem. So he just kind of got back from Valinor with his stolen Cimmerils, but Middle-earth is pretty empty. It's kind of a blank canvas for him. So the Sindar are everywhere, and he obviously sees that as an issue because he thought the Noldor were his issue, but now he's realizing that there's a new quote-unquote foe for him, and it's the Sindar, because they have just been multiplying, growing, expanding while he's been gone, and he don't like that. He kind of looks at them as a sleeping giant. So what is his first move? It is to release the orcs. So he has created the orcs. There is some debate about the origin of these orcs. Some people think they are elves who have been tormented over many ages and then kind of transitioned into orcs. He thinks, orcs, they can go the Peter Jackson route where he kind of makes them down in the mud and the grime, and they are birthed out of that. There's a lot of different theories. This is where I kind of do like the Rings of Power. I think it is just corrupted elves who have been kind of transitioned into darkness, and that's why they become so, I don't know if feral is the right word, but just angry with madness and bloodlust. So he releases his minions into the world, and now begins kind of the first war between the elves and Morgoth's armies. So the Sindar, who up until now have kind of been chilling in the woods, kind of find themselves fighting for their lives against the hordes of Morgoth. And it's bad. It's really bad. The Sindar do not have Feanor's creations of weapons. I mean, they still have their bows and their arrows, but past that, they're kind of fighting with stick spears, and they're just not doing well. So who saves the day? It's not the Noldor. It's not Feanor. It is the dwarves.
Hey!
Yes, the dwarf. We now enter Act 3, and I call it the dwarves enter the chat.
All right.
For all you millennials. So at this point, that's a little Gen Z-ish too, entering the chat. I don't know if you got that reference, but...
No, I got it.
At this point, we kind of get the first real introduction to the dwarves. I did talk about them before. They were not made by Eru. They were actually created by Aule. One of the Valar he was a little too eager to start creating things. He was getting a little jealous. Everybody else got to do it. He was like, I want to create something. Luckily, Eru did not smite them. He came very, very close, but he did not. And instead, he let them sleep underground until the elves woke up and kind of made it a fair trade. The elves get to wake up. The dwarves get to wake up. So while the Sindar have been traveling around the land and growing that way, the dwarves have been thriving in their little caves, doing their little mining, their little creation in the Lonely Mountain and all the other mountains of Middle Earth, kind of growing in numbers that way. And in Middle Earth, the dwarves of Belegost and Nograd have set up shop in the Blue Mountains, and the Blue Mountains are kind of they're even more east than the Lonely Mountain, but they kind of hear. Obviously, they're attuned to what's happening on the actual surface, and they kind of hear whispers of this massive war with the elves and the orcs. And they're like, "Oh, fighting! We've been kind of bored for centuries. Let's get in this. This is our thing."
Toss me.
Toss me. I cannot make the distance. You'll have to toss me. So Thingol, in his infinite wisdom, meets up with the dwarves, and they actually form an alliance, which is a big deal in Tolkien's Legendarium, because his legends is the typical elves and dwarves do not get along, which that story will come up a lot more later.
Well, that's why after he says toss me, he says don't tell the elf.
Yes, there's still always a little bit of bitterness there, even though they are friends at times. So now that the dwarves are in the chat, the orcs get wrecked.
As they should.
As they should. So this is where now the Sindar and the dwarves kind of help each other grow, because now the Sindar have weapons. The dwarves bring their own armor and weapons to the battle. Hint, hint, Mithril has now entered the chat as well.
Oh, okay.
So this is where Mithril is discovered, and the elves use that to their advantage, the strongest metal in Middle Earth. And the Sindar push Morgoth's forces back, and for now, Middle Earth is safe-ish. So there is another kind of time of peace, and I say ish because now is when, basically right when the orcs kind of get pushed back to the Iron Mountains to the north, Fëanor shows up. So that's why I say it is safe-ish. So now the last full blurb before this chapter ends is Act 4. I call it Morgoth Plays the Long Game. So the first war did not go as Morgoth planned, obviously, but he is a patient guy. He's been waiting centuries to kind of pull a move. So he is okay playing the long game. And he's now kind of made his new castle up in the north, and he's got a lot of weapons at his arsenal, and he has his first dragon. Glaurung is the dragon's name, and there's a lot more on Glaurung soon. But for now, he retreats, and he makes his new castle called Angband, which I love that name. And he just kind of sits and simmers and waits for his next move. He chose... The reason he left a tomb, though, is it was kind of out in the open. Yes, it is in the north in the cold, but it's not as defensible as Angband because Angband is knee-deep in the Iron Mountains, which is just a mess to trek unless you know it. So that's why he kind of chose that location.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about in just a minute about a whole other castle that's hard to get to in the mountains.
That's the theme. Hard to access castles is the theme. But yeah, now the Noldor have arrived, bringing their own chaos with them, and the Sindar kind of have no idea what's coming, but their peaceful days are numbered. So now I now have another dramatic outro thanks to ChatGPT. This is not a sponsored plug, but you guys can sponsor us if you want to. Here we go. My dramatic voice again. And so Middle Earth braces for what is to come. The Sindar have defended their homes, but darkness has not yet been vanquished. The Noldor will soon enter their lands, and with them, they bring tales of betrayal, murder, and an oath that can never be broken. The fate of Beleriand hangs in the balance. What happens when two mighty elven kingdoms collide? And will Morgoth's patience soon pay off? Let's find out in the next episode. So let me know what you guys think on our socials. If you guys think the elves are going to figure their differences out, or if Morgoth is going to kind of reign discord amongst them. Just let us know. But that is it. We got through it. I warned you this week was going to be longer, but that is probably the longest chapter in the book. So
yeah, it's all right. We love the drama. We love the tea. We love the drama.
We love the tea, and it is all chaos from here on. So continue to be strapped in, if you will.
Oh, we're locked in.
we are locked in, chat. So we now talked about an indefensible castle, and we will now transition over to Westeros.
Welcome to the Kingdom of Mountain and Vale. That is the former name of the Vale of Arryn prior to Aegon's conquest. And with that, we have arrived at one of the smallest but most heavily guarded of the Seven Kingdoms. And just so you guys know, map-wise, the Vale is kind of a peninsula, kind of. It's kind of like... we'll talk about it in a second, but it's got these little like outcrops called the fingers. It's got all these little juts of land that are peninsulas in and of themselves. So that kind of makes the whole region a peninsula. Anyway, enough about peninsulas. But 3 of its borders rely on water. The top border is a bay of water called the Bight. That's the northern border. The narrow sea makes up the eastern coastline. And then to the south, they have the Bay of Crabs. And then almost like nearly the entire western border of the Vale is mountains. And this range of mountains is called the Mountains of the Moon. And so for this reason, because there's lots of mountains and rocks and stones, any bastards born in the Vale take the last name Stone. So the Vale, because it's kind of so closed off from the rest of the Seven Kingdoms, they tend to be a bit isolated in terms of trade and visitors by land, but they do trade by sea a lot. They have one really big city that we will talk about later. So, yeah, buckle up. There's a few areas that we're gonna have some pit stops, and hope you brought your souvenir money because they've got some cool little souvenirs that you might want to pick up along the way.
I love knickknacks.
So let's talk about the Vale of Arryn. So, and it's kind of confusing because that's the name of like the entire region, but then there's also this specific valley called the Vale of Arryn, and they sometimes refer to it as the Vale of Arryn proper. So it's just this really big valley right in the middle of the Mountains of the Moon. And it's very fertile, very tranquil, lots of small rivers, lakes, crops grow really well here. Things like wheat, barley, corn, pumpkins, lots and lots of fruit. All that type of thing can grow really easily in the soil here. And this is accessible by road, the road that's called the High Road, which it's an east-west road. And so you could travel by road to get to the Vale proper, but to actually get into the Vale, like the entire region, you have to, on the road, there's this place called the Bloody Gate.
Oh.
And you have to pass under the Bloody Gate to get into the Vale. So let's dive into that because that's a heck of a name.
I was to say that sounds a little ominous.
It is. It is a little bit. The Bloody Gate is a large keep. I mean, it looks like a castle, but it's for military purposes only. It can house like 2,000 to 3,000 men, I think. So it's built right into the mountains along the high road, and so there's like these two towers that are connected by a bridge, and it basically cuts off travel at any point between the Vale and the Riverlands on the high road. So it's actually so narrow, like to pass under that bridge. The road is so narrow that only 4 knights on horseback could ride next to each other. So if you recall back to the episode where we talked about the wall, the top of the wall is actually 3 times wider because they said you can 12 riders can ride next to each other on top of the wall. So
my God,
very, very narrow.
Yeah,
which
that seems like a hazard almost.
Yeah, well, it makes it easy to defend.
Yes, defensive strategy. Yes.
Yeah. There is an appointed guard here called the Knight of the Gate, and he's in charge of the whole keep. But again, he's in charge of like 2,000 to 3,000 men at a time, depending on how heavily guarded the gate is at the time. And then there's also been a few points in history where they've sent almost their entire army to the Bloody Gate, and so those people are camping out kind of on the Vale side, not the Riverland side. So yeah, pretty impressive little way to completely shut themselves off from any land invasions. So then here's our next little pit stop for the day. This is called the Gates of the Moon.
I love that
name. The Gates, yeah, I do too. The Gates of the Moon and the Eyrie itself, which is the big castle that the Arryns live in. These two are actually really, like distance-wise, really close to each other. The Gates of the Moon sits at the foot of a big mountain called the Giant's Lance. And then the Eyrie, of course, sits on top of that mountain. But so the Gates of the Moon is a very sturdy, very large, but not altogether beautiful castle. It's very plain, kind of a plain Jane. It serves its purpose. Like it can house a lot of people. It can house an army and a royal family, but it's not necessarily, it wasn't made with the finest stone or marble or anything like that. It's not special. It's just big. So, yeah, it was originally constructed by the first men when they still lived there. And of course they constructed like ring forts. So it was originally meant to be, to house military type people. And it has been added onto over the centuries a lot. That's why it's so big now. But its main function was never to entertain or to have noble guests or anything like that. It was built just because it's easy to defend. It does have a moat and a gatehouse a yard for training and a well, so they have fresh water. And it houses this like fleet of mules, because those mules the mules are what are the animals that can climb up the giant's lance, the big mountain, to deliver goods and stuff and people back and forth from the gates of the moon down here
You
and
got
the
a
Eyrie
whole
up here.
gaggle of mules is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, a gaggle. Is that what,
I have
is that
no
what you
idea.
call it? Okay. Yes. So that is the gates of the moon. So pick up a mule while you're there as a souvenir. And then let's move on to the Eyrie. Now, the Eyrie is kind of the opposite of the gates of the moon. The Eyrie is relatively small, but extremely grand. It juts out from a shoulder towards the very top of the giant's lance. And it was built to be impregnable. It has proven to be impregnable, except by dragon. So it is, you cannot try to attack it by land at all. There's no way. To even get up there as a traveler, you first have to ride up the mountain on a mule. It's a nearly sheer trail. There are parts of that trail you could walk, but like, why would you when there's
sounds
mule?
horrible.
Yeah. And then you also have to pass these 3 way castles, which are basically just put in place to prevent unwanted guests from gaining access to the royal family. And these 3 little way castles have name, like they're fun to me. They each have their own little name and purpose. The first way castle is called Stone. This is the only one that's really accessible by foot. So there's that one. It's kind of towards the bottom of the trail. Then to get from Stone to the next one, which is called Snow, you for sure need to use yourself a mule.
Got to do it.
Can't be walking that path. And then to get from Snow to Sky, that's the 3rd way castle, is called Sky. That's the most treacherous path. And even on the mule, while you're riding on it, a lot of travelers get vertigo while they're on this portion of the journey between Snow and Sky. And then once you get to Sky, you have 2 options to get up to the Eyrie. You can rock climb, where with some roughly hewn handholds, so you can go full ninja warrior. Or you have to ride up their little elevator, which is not a real elevator, but it's these these big wicker baskets, like on a winch, and the winch is powered by oxen. It's a whole thing.
Is it OSHA approved?
Probably not. It's Westeros. So, it's a whole thing. You still can't, even if you somehow make it all the way up to Sky, the 3rd way castle, if you're like an army, you still can't get to the Eyrie unless you want to make your army mountain climb. It's bizarre.
They're feeling pretty safe up there, though.
Yeah, it's actually great. So, so then you get all the way up to the Eyrie, and that is where House Arryn resides. They live there 3 of the 4 seasons. They live there during spring, summer, and fall. But during winter, they do have to descend their mountain and reside within the gates of the moon, because even the mules struggle to carry goods up and down the trails in the wintertime. Their winters are very harsh because of the mountains. So we could, even in the summer, the tops of all those mountains still have snow. So you can imagine the winters would be worse. But let's talk about the castle itself, because this is the stuff, y'all. This is the stuff right here. Yeah, your souvenir from the Eyrie is some blue-veined white marble.
Oh.
So it is made out of pristine white stone on the outside. And then on the inside are these large slabs of marble that have dark blue veins going through the marble. It features 7 slim towers, because we know the Arryns love themselves the 7.
We'll love the 7. Also, quick interjection. Can I get this marble for a countertop, please?
You could sure try.
If it entails mules, I'm out.
And then other notable features of the Eyrie are that pretty much everywhere within the castle you can hear this waterfall that's nearby. And it's the waterfall itself is called, I forget her name. It's some girl, I think Elaine or Alicane or something. Anyway, it's her tears is what the waterfall is called. So that's kind of fun and like pleasant. Like you can just hear a waterfall around the corner. So I think that's nice. And it's also, while you're there, it's very common to see falcons flying around in the garden, the courtyards, around the towers. Falcons love to fly around up there. They've got little roosts up there and stuff like that. And so, which is par for the course because their sigil has a falcon on it. So, go figure.
It's all. Is it the Alyssa's Tears? Would that be the one?
Yes, that's it. Alyssa. There you go. And I forget why she was crying, but that's also a whole story. But
yes, it's a full page in the wiki here, so we'll let you guys do the research on that one.
Yeah. Why was Alyssa crying? So then inside of the Eyrie, there's this big grand hall, which we kind of see in the show, but it's not as grand as what
it felt pretty small, and I assume that was just due to budget reasons.
I think so. And because there's really only like a couple scenes that happen there.
Yeah.
So anyway, and the show also makes it look like it's a round hall, but it's not. It's rectangular and it's long and it's large. So it's called High Hall. And at the very end of High Hall, there are 2 weirwood thrones, one for Lord Arryn and one for Lady Arryn. In the exact middle of the High Hall is the Moon Door. And we did see an interpretation of the Moon Door in the show, but it is described differently in the book. And I kind of like book version better. Show version was cool. It played well for TV. I just think book version makes more sense and is less hazardous. Because if you anyway, here we go. The real book version is the Moon Door is a regular door built into a wall, not the floor.
Yeah.
It does open inward, so you like when you open it, you're pulling it towards yourself. But when you open it, it reveals pure sky, like a sheer drop off. So that part they got correct. It's if you go out the Moon Door, use dead.
It's like walking the plank.
Yeah, basically.
I like that better.
Just the show itself made it a door that opened up on the floor.
It's like a porthole almost, yeah.
Yeah. Which was cool, but
for dramatic effect, I get it, but I like the door on the wall better.
Yeah, and it's the fact that it's like directly in the middle of this long hall.
Yeah, it's more ominous.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, the other part that the show got right is that that's traditionally what they use for executions. So you get sent out the Moon Door. So that part, all of that stuff they got correct. It was just the way it's designed is different.
Tough way to go.
Yeah.
As a guy who fears heights, that is my nightmare.
Yeah, for sure. The Eyrie does have a godswood, but no weirwood grows in it because they did try, supposedly. They tried to get a weirwood to grow there, but it wouldn't grow because the soil up that high, the soil is so like stony and rocky, it just wouldn't take root. They last fun feature, which I don't know if it's necessarily actually fun, but it's a feature. Anytime they have prisoners, they put them in sky cells, is what they call them. Sky cells are what they sound like. They are a prison cell that is open to the sky.
Nope.
And Tyrion is in a sky cell for a little portion.
God, is he really?
So you do. Yeah, you see it in the show, and they do it right. They do it correctly. 3 of the walls are stone, and of course the back wall has like a door on it that leads to the hallway, to the rest of the cells. But so there's these 3 walls of stone, and then the 4th wall doesn't exist. It's just completely open to a sheer drop down the side of the mountain. Plus, then there's this added: the floor is not flat. The floor slightly angles down.
That is evil.
It is.
Oh my God.
I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not good. Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
it's
what happens if
it's
you're
a
sleeping
lot.
and you just, roll over in your sleep and then all of a sudden you're just tumbling down?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, God.
So yeah, it's an interesting little feature. And then fun fact, the Eyrie itself took about 7 generations to build. And in the middle of there, during like the 4th generation, the project was actually completely abandoned, and there was just a bunch of like unfinished stone walls up on the top of the mountain. But I'm really glad they did come back and finish it. There's a few more details about this castle that are pretty fascinating. I'm going to skip them for now so we can talk about the rest of the Vale. But yeah, if you just want to give the Eyrie itself a search on the wiki, it's kind of it's a lot. There's a lot there. They obviously, because they're Andals, a lot of it is about the 7 and the faith of the 7 and all that type of stuff. But it's a cool place, and it's not visited very often because it's so hard to get to. So I think that's it's interesting how like grand and intricate everything is there, since people don't go there very often.
Fascinating.
So yeah,
And you need to figure out why Alyssa is crying. So go check that out.
We need to figure out why. Yes. Okay, so we're gonna keep on to our tour of the Vale. So we're leaving the Eyrie and the Giant's Lance and all that stuff. We're now going to the Three Sisters, and the Three Sisters are 3 islands. They're relatively small, actually. That they sit in the Bight, which is the northern bay, the northern border of the Vale. These 3 islands kind of sit in that bay. They have names, each of them, of course. There is Sweet Sister, Long Sister, and Little Sister.
Oh.
And these 3 islands are actually very loosely held by the Vale. Like they're part of the Vale on maps, and like most of the time when they feel like being part of the Vale, they are. But they're actually kind of relatively independent. And there was like a 1,000-year struggle for control of those 3 islands between House Arryn and House Stark, because on the other side of the Bight is the north, is White Harbor, and we talked about White Harbor a lot. So the north is right there. And these 2 houses really, really struggled over these 3 little islands for a very, very long time. Both sides saw some victories for long stretches of time. So it's not like one side gained control for a couple years and then it went right back to the other side. Like there was like a couple hundred years where one house controlled them, and then another couple hundred where the other house controlled them. So at some point, House Stark just kind of decided, like, why are we fighting over these 3 little islands when we already have so much land? So when they kind of gave up or bowed out or whatever, then the ownership of the 3 islands passed back to House Arryn and the Vale. But these 3 islands still trade heavily with the north via White Harbor, because White Harbor is not very far. And for that reason, they're kind of wealthy, people that live on that, or at least the people who trade. And they also get all kinds of visitors from the north, but also from across the Narrow Sea and the Vale. So to me, it's a little bit like Vegas. And the Septons call the 3 sisters a den of avarice and sin. So
it's Westeros.
I'm
Vegas.
assuming, yeah, it's Westeros Vegas is kind of how I took it. So yeah, that's the 3 sisters. And now let's circle back to those fingers we were talking about. The fingers are individual peninsulas that kind of stick out into the Narrow Sea from the Vale. These are barren especially compared to like the heartland of the Vale, where farming is everywhere. The fingers have no farming. They are described as treeless and stony. We do know that this is where the Andals first landed when they sailed over here from Essos, because on all these stony outcrops, they carved a whole bunch of 7-pointed stars into the stones. Yeah. They just went crazy with the
I
carving.
forgot they established we're here. Here's all of our carvings.
Yeah. And another little interesting tidbit is that the Fingers is famously the seat of House Baelish, but they hold a very small keep on the smallest of the Fingers. And that fact, in addition to his small stature, is like he's very short and slim. That is how Peter Baelish earned his nickname Littlefinger.
I never knew that, actually.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
His family reigns, if you can call it reigning. They are from the smallest finger, and he's also a very small man in more ways than one. He's a very small person, like just a terrible person.
He's not a great guy.
No. So the Mountains of the Moon is like our whole western border. And the mountains themselves are said to be nearly impassable. Like to try to navigate your own way through those mountains is nuts. Like you're not going to make it long because the mountains themselves are treacherous, but also you're probably going to run into some of the mountain clans. So yes, the mountains themselves are very large, like tall and wide. They have super harsh conditions like sheer cliffs, snow-capped summits, things like that. Rock, what is that called? Like rock fall, what is that called?
Oh, I don't know.
Falling rocks.
Yep.
You know, when you're like driving out west and it's like, beware of the falling rocks. There's that too.
A rock hazard is what I'll call it.
Rock hazard. And they almost completely shut the Vale off from the rest of Westeros. So yeah, you're going to want to stay on the high road, but then you're going to have to also get through the Bloody Gate. If you veer too far off the high road, you're going to probably run into these clans.
No, thank you.
And you don't want to run into these clans.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. The mountain clans began when the Andals invaded the Vale and began to drive back some of the first men. And when they won, or, established control of the Vale, the remaining first men retreated to the mountains and made permanent homes there. And the descendants of those people still live in the same manner that they have for thousands of years.
Oh.
So the mountain clans operate independently from House Arryn. They are not affiliated. They don't even like House Arryn. They're kind of enemies. And these groups of people are often referred to as wildlings, just like the wildlings that live beyond the wall. And just like those wildlings, they don't like anyone of nobility or anyone who swears fealty to any sort of nobility. It just kind of like goes against their personal code. And something to note, I think we talked about this in the episode where we talked about the North. In the north of the North, there are some other clans that are sometimes kind of referred to as mountain clans, but not. Those are not the same. Those people are actually like respected by Northerners, and those people respect the Starks and all of that stuff. So these mountain clans are different than the ones that are in the North.
Gotcha.
Just to be transparent. Okay, and now here's a name drop, but they're fun. It's a fun little name drop. These are the known mountain clans, and they've got some fun names. So here we go. The Black Ears, the Burned Men, the Howlers, Milk Snakes,
Whoa,
Moon Brothers, Painted Dogs, Red Smiths, Sons of the Mist, and Sons of the Tree.
Oh,
and then the Stone Crows.
Wow.
Yeah, aren't those fun?
I want to know the story behind Milk Snakes. I think we're all asking that question right now.
Yes. Oh, Lord. And Tyrion, if you remember, he famously enlists about 300 mountain clansmen to help him in a battle. I think the battle is actually against like Robb Stark and the Northern Army. But they do actually end up following Tyrion and riding in the vanguard for House Lannister. And then he lets them come back to King's Landing with him, and it's a whole thing because the Gold Cloaks don't want to let in these wildlings, but Tyrion says they can come in. It's kind of funny. Do you remember that part
I do.
in the show? Yeah.
The golden era
is,
of GOT.
Yeah. That is the mountain clans. And now let's make our way to Gulltown. And Gulltown is the only major city in the Vale, and it's a port city. It sits right at the mouth of the Bay of Crabs, where it meets up with the Narrow Sea. So it's at the southern part now. We're at the southern border of the Vale. Gulltown itself is completely surrounded by a wall. So it's like a walled-in city. And that offers a nice level of like safety and protection to captains that dock their ships there. And that's what helped it get so big, I think, because it's different than other port cities are pretty open. This one is walled in and easily protected. So this is how the Vale is able to obtain so many treasures from Essos, like spices and jewels and fabrics and things like that, even though it's shut off from the other 7 kingdoms. And this is also kind of one of the ways they stay relevant with their counterparts in the rest of Westeros, because Gulltown is one of the busiest port cities in all of Westeros. So
Gotcha.
there you go. All right. The people of the Vale they're called Valemen, and they are known to be, especially the men, but even the women, are known to be well-trained and loyal fighters. They are all extremely devout to the faith of the 7. Surprise, surprise. And they have greater numbers than it might seem, which I think at some important points in the story leads other noble houses to kind of underestimate them.
This is my own bias, because I always thought they were kind of a smaller faction.
Yeah, they seem like they would be, but they actually are just good at hiding themselves because it's so hard to access their lands. You just can't really tell how many people they have.
A low-key powerful kingdom. Yeah.
For sure. And Valemen are also really good farmers. They take advantage of the rich soil within the valley, like the Vale proper. And they are actually able to grow crops that rival the crops grown in the Reach. We'll get to the Reach in a couple episodes, but the Reach provides food to like most of Westeros. They're kind of the known, farmers and providers of crops, but the farmers in the Vale are just as good. That's kind of fun. All right, so let's meet House Arryn. House Arryn is one of the great houses of Westeros, and they are the ruling house of the Vale. They are of Andal descent, but they have intermarried with several lines of first men, including House Royce. House Royce is pretty important. I'm going to tell you the whole backstory, and then I might touch on a little bit on House Royce in modern Game of Thrones times. But the sigil of House Arryn features a falcon, and then their words are as high as honor.
Of course, because I get it, because they're high up there. Clever.
Yep. However, House Arryn actually originated from pretty humble beginnings. If you remember from last episode, when the Andals first landed in the Vale, it took them about 60 years or 2 generations to completely conquer the Vale. And there was this one specific deciding battle that sealed their control of the Vale. There were 2 main players in this battle. The first one was Sir Artus Arryn, and he was just a knight, an Andal knight. He was born in the Vale. He was kind of like 2nd generation, but he was not born over in Andalos. He was born in the Vale and was knighted because he was a good fighter. And then there's King Robar Royce. He's the reigning king of Mountain and Vale, rules the First Men, most of the First Men. Some of the other groups of First Men were still kind of operating on their own, but he was in charge of a pretty large group of them. And then Sir Artus Arryn gained some notoriety through his ability to be, a good fighter, and he earned himself the nickname the Falcon Knight.
That's rad.
And mostly because his helm had 2 falcon wings on the top.
Oh,
For funsies.
because why not?
So here's how this is actually like a pretty epic battle, and I don't love battle scenes, but if this one ever makes it onto TV, it'll be pretty cool. So King Robar Royce, he's the king of the First Men. He had begun to unite his fellow First Men against the invading Andals, and he was doing pretty well. Like, he was amassing a pretty large number of First Men. He was training them properly. Like, they were ready to fight off these Andals. However, they charge up to the Giant's Lance, and they get ready for this epic battle. The battle itself is called the Battle of the 7 Stars, and the battle takes place at the foot of the Giant's Lance, which is where the Eyrie and the Gates of the Moon now sit, is at the bottom, on top and at the bottom of this very mountain. So King Royce and his men, they arrive to this giant mountain, make camp, dig trenches. They fortify these trenches with spikes. They're all set for a big epic battle. The Andals don't show up until 3 days later, and they show up kind of at nighttime. So then these 2 camps of people just have to, like, all night long be like, oh, dang, tomorrow we're going to go to war. So then the following morning, the battle begins, and the legend says that the First Men resisted the first 6 Andal attacks, but the 7th attack took, of course it was the 7th attack.
Always a 7.
Yes. This is the attack that took out a few key knights on the First Men's side, not King Robar, but some of his really good knights. So then King Robar himself, he had kind of been sitting back, protected because he's the king. He himself joins the battle. He's like, come on, we got to charge. And he slays this Andal knight named Torgold the Grim. There's a backstory with Torgold, but
Torgold.
basically...
What a name.
Torgold, yeah. King Robar, slays him. So Torgold is no more. And then King Robar, kind of far away on the other side, he sees the Falcon Knight. He sees the helm with the wings.
Oh, iconic helm.
Yes, he's like, charge, So he goes over there. He starts dueling with this Sir Artus, the Falcon Knight, and he slays him.
Oh.
He kills him. But just wait. Just then, coming around the corner of the foot of the Giant's Lance on like a goat trail or something, this little tiny trail that nobody really knew existed, 500 Andal knights on horseback come around the other side.
They're getting flanked.
And they take the First Men by surprise, and this group of Andal knights was led by the real Sir House Arryn. Yes, the one that King Robar killed was a decoy. He was dressed up in the armor to make it look like he was the Falcon Knight, but he was not. So safe to say, this tactic worked wonderfully. King Robar was killed. It is debated who actually killed King Robar, and nobody really knows, but in the end, he was killed. This is when the First Men were officially defeated once and for all in the Vale, and then this is when the remaining First Men then went to live in the Mountains of the Moon and formed the Mountain Clans. So
what a power move.
Yes. So the Andals were so impressed with Sir Artus Arryn, they elevated him to king, crowned him right then and there. He was King Artus Arryn the First of his name, know. And that's what established House Arryn.
What a good day for that guy.
Yeah.
The poor sap who was the decoy. I want to mention him. Shout out to that guy. You paid the ultimate sacrifice, but you formed a kingdom with your death. So
you put the team on your back.
You put the team on his back. No.
Yeah, since then, House Arryn has actually, like, when you go back and look, they're so like quiet and like we just like kind of forget that they're there. But when you go back and look at it, they've played an important part in almost all the political dramas that we witness in Westeros. Like during Aegon's conquest, they resisted and fought against the Targaryen invasion, and they were actually resisting pretty well. So that eventually Aegon sends his sister wife, you know, because she's both his sister and his wife.
Yep.
Her name is Visenya. He sends her to the Vale to subdue them, air quotes, subdue them. So knowing that this was coming, the Queen Regent of the Vale, her name is Shara Arryn. She's the regent because her son is too young to rule. But she sends her whole army to the Bloody Gate to be like, you can't come in, you know?
Yep.
But Visenya is a dragon rider, and her dragon is Vhagar. We know Vhagar.
I know that name.
Yep, we know him.
That's an old dragon. Then.
And,
Holy crap.
Yeah, he is old. She flies Vhagar right on up to the inner courtyard of the Eyrie. And
Well, is this the first person to access it?
I mean, unwelcomed, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And Shara, I think, was down. I wrote that she was at the Bloody Gate. I don't think she was at the Bloody Gate. I think she was down at the Gates of the Moon, like the bigger castle at the bottom of the mountain. Anyway, by the time Shara makes it back up to the Eyrie, her little son, and he's like young, is sitting on Visenya's lap and asking if he can go for a ride on the dragon with her.
Oh boy.
At this point, Shara really has no choice but to bend the knee. And from then on, House Arryn has been known as the Defenders of the Vale and the Wardens of the East.
Wow.
So, yeah. They also, House Arryn plays a super important role in the Dance of the Dragons as well. We've already met a couple of the important people from their house in the show House of the Dragon. The first is Lady Emma, who goes on to be Queen Emma. She was born in Arryn. She is the first wife of King Viserys and the mother of Rhaenyra.
Well,
and she's half Arryn and half Targaryen. And then she, marries a Targaryen. Yeah. And then the second important character that from House Arryn is Lady Jane Arryn, and we did meet her briefly towards the end of season 2, but I'm not going to say nothing else about her because I don't do no spoilers.
So for someone who doesn't know spoilers, let me try to connect the dots here. She is the one who turned one of the daughters away, and now she's kind of like gone off trying to find a dragon. That's what it looks like she's doing. That's that yes. Storyline.
Damon's daughters from Laena.
Yes.
Yeah. She got
turned away.
Yeah. Not, I guess, just the one. Not the other daughter is still with Jacaerys. Yeah.
Because didn't she go with 2 of Rhaenyra's kids too?
Yes, the little ones.
Yes. Did they get turned away too? But they're going back now.
Yeah. Well, she not turned away. She's sending them to Essos so that they stay safe.
Gotcha. Thank you for the recap.
Yeah. You're welcome. But I'm not going to say anything else because
lips are sealed.
And then in present day Game of Thrones, just as a reminder, in case you forgot, we all know that the death of Jon Arryn, who was the hand of the king to Robert Baratheon, his death is pretty much the catalyst of the entire series. So, because if he hadn't died, Robert wouldn't have asked Ned to be the hand.
Oh,
so he's pretty important. We know that Jon Arryn was married to Lysa Tully, who is Catelyn's sister. Jon was like 30 years older than Lysa, so it was always a loveless marriage. Lysa was actually always in love with Peter Baelish, Littlefinger.
Ew.
And she pretty much, even in the book, they basically say it in the show, and then I think in the book it's kind of the same thing. Like she doesn't 100% confirm it, but she kind of implies that her son Robin Arryn is actually not an Arryn at all. He is actually a Baelish or a Stone. So truthfully, where the current Game of Thrones story stands, the Arryn line has ended, which is a little bit sad because they have such a incredible origin story. But it is mentioned multiple times throughout the series and in some of his other series too, like Dunk and Egg, it's mentioned that House Arryn has these like lesser branches kind of sprinkled throughout the Vale. And one of those lesser branches is actually pretty wealthy because they control Gulltown. So there is a chance that if it comes out that Robin Arryn is not really an Arryn, and if that's contentious or whatever, maybe one of these distant relatives will pick up the torch for House Arryn.
Gotcha. Man, that is tragic.
That's our tour of the Vale and House Arryn.
I had no idea that they had this much history, because it's part of their identity, I think, is that they get involved in the politics, but they don't overreach, and they're just so defensible as a nation that you really you can consider them untouchable almost.
Right, exactly, yeah. So
they're a low-key strong faction of Westeros, and I had no idea.
Yeah, I think that is, so the book has not gotten here yet, obviously. Sorry, my dog is barking. We are not here yet in the books, but in the show, when Sansa enlists the help of all the Knights of the Vale to help, in the Battle of the Bastards with Jon and all that. Like, that's why that's so significant. And I think that kind of got lost in the show because they didn't get to explain all this back history of House Arryn. But yeah, the fact that she shows up with the Knights of the Vale, that's a pretty big ass deal.
Yeah, it was a very quick, in the show, it was a very quick, like, this is big because they're here and Jon's surrounded and all that jazz, but the weight of them actually being there and that the history of their house, like, it did not play well into the show. And I get it because they only have so much time, but it was nice to have this intro to them, really, because it's so limited on the show.
Yeah. So now if you go back and watch the Battle of the Bastards, now you'll know. It
has a whole new weight to it. Even better. I love that episode.
Yep. I do too.
That was great.
At the end, she gets Ramsay.
Oh my God! That's when the show was just peaking. It was awesome.
Oh my gosh, this dog! Sorry if you can hear her.
It's actually not. You can't. It's not being captured, so I think you're good.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
All right. Well, fellow adventurers, I think that is a wrap for today's journey into the realms of Westeros and Middle-earth. We hope you've enjoyed journeying through the histories, mysteries, and fascinating lore of these worlds.
We'll return with insights, laughs, and maybe even some unexpected dragons of wisdom along the way. Next up in our Middle-earth adventure, we will learn of the hiding of Valinor and the creation of men.
Woo!
Our tour of Westeros will take us to the Westerlands, and we'll get cozy with our favorite villains, the Lannisters.
Yes, I cannot wait. And we encourage you guys to join our conversations on our Instagram. It is at fortheloveof.lore. Share your theories, tell us your grievances, or just chat about how you discovered these epic sagas yourself.
Like, what's your favorite character arc in Game of Thrones, or your favorite battle scene in The Lord of the Rings? We want to hear from you.
So thank you for tuning in, and remember, the best adventures are the ones we take together. We swear it by the old gods
and
the new.